Hey folks, it's Rod with Pow Group. Welcome back on The Pursuit of Wealth. Today is Wednesday. It's August 21st, 2024. Hope you're doing well. And with me today is Anthony Martinelli. He's the founder of TheMarijuanaHerald.com. It's a marijuana news and information website you've more than likely heard about. I posted a video on it as well with a recent article that got a lot of attention. So I wanted to say welcome, Anthony, to the show, and thank you very much for taking the time to meet with me today.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm happy to be here.
My pleasure. And before we get started, before we jump into some questions about the MJ Herald and the backstory there, and then we'll jump into, for our viewers, we'll definitely be touching on rescheduling. I just wanted to get some backstory with regards to you and where you're from, where you grow up, where did you grow up, and how did you get involved into the MJ space?
Yeah, definitely. So I currently live in Des Moines, Washington, which is kind of a small suburb of Seattle. I grew up in Florida, which is where I was born. I lived there until I was 12. I actually moved to Des Moines with my family and have lived there ever since. And I got into the cannabis space around 2011 when I launched a different cannabis news site called thejointblog.com. Around the same time, I started working with a nonprofit organization called Sensible Washington. And I actually ran the Joint Blog from 2011 to 2019. I launched the Marijuana Herald in 2018. At the time, I had a different writer who ran it called Emily Watkins. And I actually sold both sites to an investment group in 2019. And then about a year later, I decided, because they weren't making use of it, to purchase back the Marijuana Herald. And then so around 2020, early 2021 is when I relaunched, rebranded the Marijuana Herald, and have had it as an active daily news site ever since then. So, going on 14, 15 years that I've been in this space, and don't plan to stop anytime soon.
You touched on it a little bit, but maybe give a little bit of a backstory there on, where the idea came from, what motivated you to start the Marijuana Herald, and I think you said it was created in 2018. So maybe if you can just give a little bit of a backstory on that.
Yeah, definitely. So honestly, in 2018, and particularly even before that, but there wasn't really a lot of cannabis-based news sites that were really following journalistic standards. There were a lot of mainstream outlets who were posting cannabis news with often a negative bias. And there were a lot of cannabis-based websites that seemed, not to dog on anyone, but just kind of a little unprofessional. And so I launched the Marijuana Herald with the thought that, we're going to do a cannabis news site that's going to focus strictly on the news. It's not going to be opinion. It's not going to be a bias. We're going to follow, AP style standards. We're going to make sure that we, vet and thoroughly go through all of our information before we post it. And so that was kind of the basis for why the site launched, is I just thought there was kind of a hole in regards to proper marijuana journalism that wasn't just mainstream outlets sometimes writing about cannabis. So that was kind of the crux of when I initially, why I initially launched the site.
Okay, cool. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of misinformation, things going around. That's actually a perfect segue into my next question. How does the Marijuana Herald ensure accuracy and integrity when it's doing its reporting, and especially in a field, like I said, where misinformation is sort of running rampant?
Absolutely. So I triple check pretty much every story that we get. All the sources that I use are typically directly from state agencies, from state legislatures, from spokespersons from state agencies. And, if I post on a study, I always, every single time, will link to the National Institute of Health or the actual peer-reviewed journal study that is initially published it. I've published hundreds of studies, for example. Not once have I not linked to the actual study. When I hear about a bill passing, I will look into the bill, read the actual bill text, make sure that everything is correct, and just really ensure that we're not just quickly grabbing onto a story and throwing it out there without, having any incorrect information be put onto that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's, that's another perfect segue actually from one of my questions is how do you, in an industry where, it's breaking news, right? How do you balance that speed of like breaking news with the importance of thorough fact checking and ethical reporting? Like not just getting it, is it kind of just like not just trying to get it out and be first? You're kind of taking a more thorough approach to it. Is that basically the gist of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we try to get information out there as quickly as possible. We do try and break news stories, and we have been able to do that in the past. But if I can't verify the information, through some type of secondary third source or some type of verification process, then I won't publish it. And there's been a couple times that has, lost us out on breaking a story. And, that can be unfortunate, but I would much rather lose out on breaking a story than to post something that is inaccurate, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I've had that struggle too, right? Especially as a content creator making videos. Sometimes you'll see something that's circulated and it's by a very reputable mainstream media outlet, but they took it out of context or they published something that they didn't fact check, right? So you kind of got to vet that, do that extra vetting, right? And I think there was you don't believe everything you read on the internet, obviously. And when I reached out to you to kind of clear things up, I was interested. I respect your work and appreciate everything that you do for the industry. And I've gotten a lot of value out of TheMarijuanaHerald.com. So I commend you for your great work. But, that some people online kind of had some differing opinions. Some people said, they were throwing around a lot of accusations that you were spreading fake news, you were recycling articles, domestic abuse cases, all these things. So I know that got pretty heated there. But, if you maybe just take a quick minute or so and just give us a little bit of backstory on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'll say is that between the Joint blog and the Marijuana Herald, I've published probably around 8,000 articles, cannabis related. That's not including articles that I've written for other websites, the We Blog, Seattle Times, like other outlets that I published for. And out of those, I've only even had a handful of accusations about any of them being incorrect. The main accusation that seems to be being thrown around is from Tom Engel, who did an article back in 2017 for a site called Mass Roots that no longer exists anymore. That was picked up by High Times. That article doesn't exist anymore. And they essentially accused us of posting fake articles, false information. And what I will say is there certainly were a couple instances when I ran the Joint blog when we would republish a story that we picked up from another site and would publish that story, and that turned out to be incorrect. And that did happen a couple times. And I've apologized for that. As soon as that happens, I edit or even remove the article. All of those instances were from years ago. Ever since I've launched the Marijuana Herald, I am much more thorough in my vetting process. The Marijuana Herald has never published fake news, information that we know is incorrect. We've published thousands of articles. They're all, you can look into the articles we've written, you can double, triple check, and they've all been correct. A couple people say that, it's fake news in regards to us having sources that they may not, in regards to the DEA article and stuff. And I know we'll talk about that in a minute, so I won't get too far into that. But what I'll say is that, I've been a cannabis journalist for almost 15 years. I've written almost 10,000 articles, and there's only really an allegation from one individual, which has spread, like there's a Twitter page, I think called like Weed Street 420, that reshare is also called as fake news, but all of their accusations are again based on the article from Tom Engel from 2017 that doesn't exist on the web anymore, other than through archive sites. So that's what I would say is, if anyone thinks we're fake news, look at the articles. You can pick any article on our website, triple check it, and you will find that it was correct information, other than in the few instances which, like with the DEA, can't be proven one way or the other, but we think will end up being correct in the end.
Definitely. And, that's just shows the importance of fact checking as well, right? And just not believing single thing you read on the internet, even if it's a reputable company, right? We're all human. And sometimes we make mistakes and we get it wrong. So as long as we're acting with integrity, which it seems like you are, and, just trying to support the industry and do a good job, right? And I appreciate, like I said, everything that you've done. And maybe just give, is there any challenges that you're facing? Like, obviously this probably was a challenge, but is there any other challenges that you face at the Marijuana Herald in the current media landscape? And how do you sort of mitigate those?
So do you mean challenges in regards to obtaining news, or do you just mean?
Yeah, just in general, is there any overarching, things that, you wish were easier or you don't like about the MJ reporting side of it? Or is it is it the people attacking you, saying it's fake news, or maybe it's another competing news website, something like that? I'm just wondering if you have any key challenges that you're trying to overcome at the moment.
Yeah, totally. So not in particular. I think that, there's always an issue when you have a site that has marijuana in the name and you're trying to reach out to lawmakers and stuff. There's certain ones that won't want to speak to you because of that. But honestly, you know, it hasn't really been much of an issue. And really, it's the biggest issue is just keeping up with the news. You know, the marijuana industry is kind of just so, and the marijuana news industry has just blown up in recent months and years. You know, just you look at this coming election in November, you know, there's so many, there's multiple states voting on legalization, on medical, there's cities, there's just so many news that there's so much news that to kind of keep up with it can be a challenge. Yeah. And to not, you know, get behind and end up publishing something days later and have kind of it be old news. And so that honestly is probably the biggest challenge, you know, in terms of like rival sites and stuff. I don't really look at that. I try to focus on getting out, you know, proper information, good information that can help people and inform people. And so, you know, I think that really overall, there hasn't been a ton of challenges. I enjoy running the site. And, you know, I think that it's a really, really entertaining and good time to be involved in the marijuana space. There's so much happening with rescheduling. Yeah. You know, we're about to have the majority of the states in the country legal potentially this November. And there's a lot going on. So it's
exciting times. Exciting times for sure. And I think you said you have 4 kids now. I just had my first child. My daughter, she's almost 7 months. Hard to believe. Time flies, but maybe just in a quick minute or so, give us, you know, a day in the life of Anthony and the Marijuana Herald. What's sort of like your workload like, and how would it differ from a traditional type of newsroom?
Yeah, definitely. So I have 4 kids. I have an 11-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1.5-year-old. We actually had me and my partner had twins last year. One of the twins, Vincent, tragically passed away actually in a case of SIDS. Wow. So his twin sister Eva is still with us. And you know, we've been healing from that, and it's really brought us together as a family, I think. But you know, average day, I typically wake up. The very first thing is my son Alonzo says, "Can you play with me, Daddy?" And so, you know, I'll typically dedicate about 20-30 minutes early on to kind of play with them, blocks and stuff, make them breakfast. Then I'll sit down on the computer, and then typically between around 8 in the morning until 5 or 6 in the evening, I will focus on news, you know, take a couple breaks in between. I really run the site kind of 24/7. So if I see some news at midnight that I hadn't published that day, then I'll get an article out. So, you know, I do work from home, and it allows me to kind of take breaks throughout the day to hang out with my kids, you know, go to the park and stuff like that. So the average day is kind of a mix of a lot of writing, a lot of news searching, a lot of playing with my kids. And then in the evening, if I have time to relax, watching a show with my partner, or maybe playing some video games, some Rocket League or something.
That's awesome. Well, my condolences. That's a terrible tragedy. I'm sorry you had to go through it. I can't even imagine. And yeah, I can kind of relate a lot to the fact that, you know, I work from home, and you know, I can spend a little bit more. I'm grateful for that. And who knows, maybe I'll reach out about some parenting advice here pretty soon. She's getting into that time where it's supposed to get really interesting. So
yes,
but wouldn't change it for the world. Like I said, she's just about 7 months. So that's awesome. I appreciate the info there. And it's an exciting time, and we'll kind of pivot over to the cannabis sector now, which I know a lot of people are probably just talk about rescheduling. And, you know, we had that article. So if I bring up the article from the other day, this is the one I made a video on. The Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, remains on track to finalize rescheduling of marijuana by October, according to an agency official who wished to remain anonymous. So, you know, maybe we'll jump into that in a second, but, you know, that's kind of what sparked the interest of me wanting to reach out to you and discuss that. And actually, my daughter just woke up, and she's crying in the background. Hopefully that's not too disruptive. But with regards to rescheduling, this is probably the number one question that my community wanted me to ask. What would be the next step, in your opinion, in the rescheduling process? I've been on record to say that I don't think they're going to try to, you know, put any roadblocks in front of this. I even interviewed political director Morgan Fox at Normal, which is a nonprofit. And he said, you know, this could take multiple years. And while, you know, there was some truth to that, right? Like it could really, in theory, it could take, you know, 5 to 7 years is what I read. And then, you know, I didn't see that as the most likely scenario. I remember you putting out an article And it actually mentioned it in this article here. If I just scroll down, the official requested anonymity. While we could not independently verify their statements, we did confirm that the individual works at the DEA. This is the same official that accurately informed us in January that the DEA would announce rescheduling before summer, which kicked it off, right? And then it came a few months later on April 30th. And fun story about that. I think I made a video on the 29th saying it was probably going to happen tomorrow. And it came out the next. Yeah, you can check that video. It was pretty crazy, but they waited till the last day of August, HHS, to announce the their recommendation. And everybody was expecting April, but 420 came around, and then my thought was, they're going to want to do the 60-day comment period, and it's my understanding that they could have extended that to 90 days if they wanted to. Mm-hmm. So 90 days, and then if you have to have an administrative hearing, like that didn't give a whole lot of time to get it done before the elections. That's kind of where I'm going with this. If they don't do something, like bare minimum, if they don't reschedule, it's a political death sentence. Like I don't know if you would agree, but in your opinion, do you think there's going to be an administrative hearing? What do you think the odds of that are, or what do you think the next step's going to be in that rescheduling process?
So personally, I would say there's probably somewhere like a 20 to 30% chance that they're going to hold a hearing. I actually brought this up with the official I spoke with, and they didn't know, but he was leaning on the fact that they won't. And I honestly think that the reason for that is because there was just such a clear consensus. There was 43,000 comments. There was 60 days for lobbying groups from all sides to have their people make comments, and they did. 43,000 comments. Less than 10% of those comments want marijuana to remain Schedule 1. That is a consensus much beyond most other issues that the DEA is, considers. And so I think that because of that, I don't think there's going to be a hearing. I think it's not necessary. I think if they do a hearing, it's going to be so that they can say that they had it, and there's no, argument years down the road that, they didn't have a hearing. I don't know one way or the other. But personally, if I had to bet one way or the other, I would say that they're not going to have a hearing, and that they'll just skip straight to issuing a final ruling.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that. Yeah, we're on the same page. I'm in the same boat. I don't think they're going to do it. Like I said, it doesn't give them a whole lot of time. And, I've been saying that I think September, October makes the most sense. I'm a technical analyst as well. So when I look at these charts, it's saying about in 2 to 3 months, we should start to see some fireworks, and then it could be a sustained bull rally based on a lot of the indicators. You have a lot of, monthly uptrends starting to confirm across the sector and whatnot, but I'll digress on that front.
And I think that you may be right in that it would definitely be a political liability if it didn't happen, especially because you actually have like senators like Senator Fetterman from Pennsylvania who have been making posts essentially saying descheduling or rescheduling is done, like it's already completed. And so when you make comments like that and then it doesn't happen by election, that can be an issue. And I think that individuals like him are making those type of comments because they're also confident that it's going to happen here really soon.
Yeah. And you have to just kind of look at the writing on the wall, right? Look at the DNC, the Dem convention, right? They had, while they're not actively talking about it in speeches, there was a billboard that said Illinois Democrats legalized marijuana, right? So they're already starting to kind of plant it in the minds, but kind of, more of on a passive approach right now. But imagine, with the Florida adult use, I think that's going to pass as well. What do you think? Just a quick yes or no. Do you think it's going to pass?
Yes, I think it is.
Yes. Okay. So I think it's going to probably be like a 65% vote, where 65% of people vote in favor of doing it. It'll get rescheduled. And then imagine we get, it'll get legalized at the adult use, become potentially the 25th state at the adult use level in the half the US, right? And then couple that with the hype from rescheduling, and then we could see banking and potential uplisting in a lame duck session as well. Like, there's a lot of catalysts going. Germany looking to fast track Pillar 2. There's talks about the Canadian government improving excise taxes here, which could add tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to some of these companies' bottom line, which we know, the difference of tens of millions or hundreds of millions is instantly going from not profitable to profitable. So, I think, that's the most likely scenario. And they're going to ride off the coattails of that rescheduling news, arguably the biggest catalyst for the sector right under the Democratic leadership. And then they'll use that, a month or two to quote Boris Jordan. People, they tend to forget quickly. So he said he worked in politics, and he said they'd usually wait till about a month and a half until an election. And then that's when they'd really start to pump it. Plus, if they're going to take I don't know if you're into crypto or not, but if they're going to do a 180 stance on crypto, so that it's no longer a one issue voter issue, right?
Mhm.
It's bipartisan. I still think they have to kind of come out and change their tune on crypto, and then MJ will be at the end. And then, well, like they're going to confuse everybody, right? Because everybody's like on the other side of the aisle. I'm going to vote for them because they're pro crypto. But
Mhm.
then the Dems come out and say, oh, we're pro crypto too. And it's like, okay, now we have a decision to make. And then a month before the election, hit them with the, we're going to deschedule it, or we're going to reschedule it and then deschedule it. And then people are really like, what do I do now? So yeah, that's what I think is going to happen. But how do you gain the intel from these these officials at the agency and DEA and other agencies? Like, do you just have a wide network? Do they reach out to you? Do you reach out to them? Maybe if you could touch on that.
Yeah, definitely. So with this individual, I actually first made a connection with them, I would say about a decade ago, when I worked for
Oh,
a cannabis website that was ran by Village Voice Media, which runs a bunch of other mainstream outlets like San Francisco Chronicle. For a while, they ran a cannabis news website that I worked for, that I wrote for as a freelance writer. And in that, I made a connection with an individual who, I don't want to give away too much information, but he did not work for the DEA, he worked for some other state agency. And then I, had a couple connection with that. I got some stories from that. And then it was years later, after I, actually earlier this year, that he recontacted me, essentially was like, hey, do you remember me? And then had this information. And I was like, okay, well, I was a little bit hesitant. I actually met with the individual online Zoom. I actually had them through a Snapchat conversation show me their ID, their DEA credentials. I verified that the name was the same, and then I verified that it was the same person I spoke with years ago. And then that's when I ended up publishing the story. I felt that I had enough information to do so. And then that individual, over the following months, has given me, kind of bits and pieces of information. The most recent one, obviously, a few days ago, when he said that they had already analyzed tens of thousands of comments, which I thought was an interesting thing, and really exemplifies that they are on track to get this done pretty soon, and that they're not slow walking it. And
Yeah,
so,
a
for this
record
particular
amount of
source,
comments too.
yeah, exactly. So for this particular source, it was a long time source, and I think that it kind of just comes around, and play, and is part of just me being in the sector for so long. And like I said, not only did I have the joint blog, the Marijuana Herald, but there's a lot of different sites that I've written for throughout the years, and that has really allowed me to build up kind of connections and stuff that some of them I don't have to hide behind it, and they don't have to say they're anonymous. There are plenty of sources that I can quote directly.
Awesome.
But in this particular instance, I don't. There's obviously reasoning why they want to remain anonymous. But I think that they are pro cannabis and they want the information to get out there. And I think they came to me specifically because of that long-term connection, because we had a positive working relationship before. And so that's why.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. That's awesome. And I'm wondering, I always think when you said something there, it reminded me like of AI, and it's like, why aren't they using AI to filter through all these comments? But
Good
maybe
question.
we'll get there. But yeah. And I think too, like with the help of AI, like obviously there's a lack of research because of the lack of reform in the US. We can't do all these studies and additional research and trials, etc. But yeah, just imagine like once we get all of that research, we get access to that, but then also, look at AI. It's like AI is already starting to kind of replace doctors. So, if we can, with the help of AI, you can potentially see, not just with research efforts from us as humans, but couple that with AI, and we could potentially see some major scientific breakthroughs and cure. I won't say anything specifically, but we could cure some serious diseases out there potentially with the help of this, right? So I think it's an exciting time for sure.
Yeah, it's funny because I was having the same conversation with my partner not long ago about
Were you?
how about how I believe the same thing. So I'm definitely with you on that.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens. But yeah, I'm very confident that we're probably going to be proven right on a lot of these, these theories or beliefs that it cures certain things. I'll leave it at that. But in terms of descheduling, though, I said that I think there's maybe like a 5% chance that they deschedule it and skip Schedule 3 and join the likes of like Germany and Canada. But the more that time goes on, I'm pretty sure it's a done deal. Like you said, they're referencing we rescheduled it in the past tense as if it's already a done deal. So what are your thoughts on descheduling? Do you think there's ever a chance that they analyze these 43,000 plus comments and say, majority of people said rescheduling wasn't enough. We're going to deschedule it and seriously take a serious look at that. But there's also some bills going around like the CAOA, there's the MORE Act, States Act and things like that. And we know, there's some bills going around there. But what are your thoughts on that? Like, do you think we could skip rescheduling and get descheduled, or do you think it's going to get rescheduled? And then what would be your view for like descheduling from there? Or
So,
full-blown legalization, I guess, if it
yeah, totally.
got there.
So I definitely think there's really a lot of momentum building around descheduling, and I think it's going to be a big issue next year, especially if the Democrats happen to take back the House. I think when it comes to the DEA, I honestly think, unfortunately, there's probably close to zero, 5% might be good, but pretty close to 0% chance that they're going to fully deschedule. I actually had brought that up with the official I spoke with, and he just kind of shook his head. And then, we kind of moved on. It seemed like that wasn't probably going to happen. And I think it's going to be rescheduling. And I think descheduling is going to be something that's going to have to be done through, like you mentioned, the MORE Act or the CAOA through the legislative process. But I really, unfortunately, do not see much of a possibility of descheduling happening through this particular order.
Yeah, I would agree. I probably wouldn't have agreed, maybe 3 months ago, but now that like to deschedule it, there's no way they would do that before the election, right? So again, go back to my prior point, it's a political death sentence if they don't do something, and descheduling is not realistic in that time frame, but they can get rescheduling done. I think September, October makes a lot of sense, but we're kind of pivoting away from rescheduling in a moment. But what are your thoughts on like the opposition? What was that guy's name from Sam? I think it was. Forget his name. His name's escaping me at the moment. But and then
Kevin Sabat, I think. But
Kevin Sabat, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
So what do you think of those, like the opposition and like lawsuits that could be forthcoming? Is that like, do you see any issue with that at all, or were you surprised by that and the amount of like FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt?
So in terms of the political opposition, honestly, I was surprised at how little there was. I mean, when you think about how THAM, the group that Kevin runs, was, dozens of times over the course of the 60-day public comment period, were trying to get their people to make negative comments, and it ended up with like 8%. Wanted Schedule 1 to remain. So I knew that it would be majority in favor of rescheduling or more, but I did not honestly expect a 92%, in support of that or more. So I think in terms of political opposition, there's not much. And in terms of the lawsuits, I think they're going to file all kinds of lawsuits, but I think it's pretty legally sound. I think that the way that they did it, and the way that, they even had the Attorney General himself sign the actual order, I think that is going to kind of help in regards to any challenges in relation to the recent Supreme Court decision regarding agency control and stuff. And so personally, I think it's pretty concrete. I think the opposition is weak, to be honest. And I think any legal argument to stopping it is even weaker.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Sounds like we're pretty similar mindset. So yeah, I mentioned that there's going to be a lot of FUD come out, and nothing's ever easy, right? If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. And it's a process, and we'll get there eventually. And majority of people want it done, so I don't think there's going to be any issue with it. It's just a matter of when, not if. But what about lobbying? Is that anything that you take part in, or do you kind of report on any lobbying efforts? Kind of maybe just touch on that real quickly.
So I don't do any lobbying now. Back, I would say back around 2011, 2012, when I was working for Sensible, I did do some lobbying in Olympia for a couple medical cannabis groups that I lobbied for in order to kind of increase patient protection. That I haven't done anything like that in well over a decade. So that's not something I do currently. And in terms of reporting on lobbying efforts, I do that sometimes, use lobbying efforts to pass certain bills and things like that. But generally, that's not something that I'm personally involved in anymore. Anyway, I did do that on the state level a while back, but not recently.
Okay, cool. Yeah, there's a lot of things going around in Washington and whatnot, but if like you've never like gone to the Hill or anything like that and walked around, try to talk to people, that's not something that kind of falls in your wheelhouse at the moment. Is that
no?
Be open to that? Or?
Usually.
Yeah, because you live in Seattle now, right?
Yeah, Des Moines, but yes, very close to Seattle.
Okay, cool. And then what do you think, like if we get rescheduling, a lot of people are just asking about like the possibility of Canadian cannabis companies entering the US. And we're already seeing that now through, whether it be hemp or, drinks like, Tilray's looking to launch Hemp 9, Delta 9 hemp drinks into, I think, Texas and New Jersey to start. But, we're seeing a lot of that. And there's, a lot of people saying that they'll never be able to sell into the US. What are your thoughts there? Like, do you think the LPs will be able to eventually sell THC derived from cannabis in the US? Do you think that's like something that rescheduling will kind of move the needle on, or do you think we have to wait for full-blown legalization at the federal level?
I think that rescheduling will kind of get the gears moving on that, and I could see some movement happening, but I do think that that's something that is going to be much more of an easy thing to do and a possibility once, there is a legalization framework, or once, maybe like the CAOA passes. But I think rescheduling can open the door for that, certainly. And like you said, to some degree, it's starting to kind of go that way. But, I do think that rescheduling will help. Whether or not that's going to be the catalyst that really kind of open those floodgates, I'm not really sure.
Yeah. And do you talk to many direct cannabis companies, whether it be American cannabis companies or like CEOs of like Canadian companies? Is that is that in your network, or you basically
I do sometimes, but I will say that I do end up focusing more on kind of legislation and research and stuff like that. So it's not as much as something I do, but I certainly do and have spoken with individuals from different cannabis companies and reported on different movements that have happened with them and stuff.
Okay, cool. And just like out of curiosity, I've just thought of this question as we were going through it. But like, what's the price like? Like the price range for flower? Like, let's say you were to buy an ounce. Like, have you noticed a lot of price compression? And like, initially here in Canada, things were super expensive and the quality was terrible. And and I'm just wondering, like, have you noticed, like, is quality still good? Is the price starting to come down? Is a little bit more affordable? Because I think the average ounce in the US is like $250 to $300 US, which is like almost $400 Canadian. So I can't imagine paying that. I pay like, you can get quad A stuff here for like 120, 150. So Canadian, so like $100. But yeah, just curious on if you noticed anything on that.
Yeah, the quality here is pretty good. When 502 first passed a decade ago, the medical market ended up getting shut down. And because of the tax, which Washington, we have the highest marijuana tax rate in the country at 37%. And initially that did cause prices to kind of increase, especially for patients. But in recent years, it's been pretty decent. Our quality is good. I focus mostly on like oil and stuff. And, you can get a really good gram of, live resin for somewhere between 10 and $15, which is, isn't bad. And in terms of the cannabis, you can get it for probably around 150 to 200 an ounce, less if you want something a little lower quality. But, I think it's decent. I admit that I haven't done much traveling to other states to kind of see how the prices compare. But I do know they've gone down in recent years. And I think our average price per gram is somewhere around like $6 or $7 now, which, could be lower, but there are some states that are much worse than that. So can't complain too much, I guess.
Yeah, I think the average, like the national average, like $10 US.
Yeah.
And then I saw an article the other day that Oregon's actually got the cheapest in the nation. And, a lot of the operators in California, they're complaining that the market's super saturated, and, the price wars, the price compression, so much competition, they're not even able to be solvent, and they're just kind of dropping like flies. And, I think that's going to be something, because we learned this through Canada, right? We don't need 1,000 licensed producers in Canada. We don't need 1,000, producers in the US, right? So I think, differentiating yourself and focusing on some sort of niche market, or some sort of particular part of the industry, right? Whether you're into retail, whether you're into producing, whatever, if it's oil, like you say, focusing more on oils or focusing more on flour or beverages, etc. We're starting to see that kind of separation in the industry, which is great to see. And we're even starting to see like dispensaries, like retailers who are only doing edibles and things like that, right? So like we're really starting to see the industry mature and differentiate, which is great. But what are your thoughts on like the multi-state operators in the US? And you don't have to even really respond if you don't have any opinion. But like, do you think it's going to be tougher times ahead for them, or do you think it's going to get easier? Because like with rescheduling when rescheduling happens, if it happens, but if it does get approved and when it happens and it's enacted, 280 goes away. Yes, it's going to add a ton of money to these companies' bottom lines. But at the end of the day, there's going to be a lot of competition, and a lot of people. There might be a ton of people not wanting to get into the MJ industry because of that barrier of entry and that 280E. So they could be waiting on the sidelines till it goes away, or with rescheduling, you might just start see more, whether it be from a medical standpoint, Canadian LP starting to sell into the US. And then eventually, if it's fully legalized and you have import export, and there's going to be a lot of competition is basically what I'm saying. And we're seeing a lot of, investment from big alcohol and tobacco. And most of those companies are choosing Canadian companies. So it's like, what do they know that we don't? Right. And I can't imagine a world where, it wouldn't be like alcohol. It wouldn't be like tobacco. It'd be some sort of dystopian world, in my opinion, if we didn't have that kind of trade going on internationally. But do you think it's tougher times ahead for the MSOs after rescheduling, or do you think it's going to get easier for them?
I think it will get easier. And I think that once descheduling eventually happens, then it will get particularly easier. But I don't really see rescheduling being, an issue. I think that it will be a challenge, because I think that people, a lot of people don't fully realize that, once it's rescheduled, in order for, any medicine to even reach the market, it will need to be, receive regulatory FDA approval and things of that nature. So it will be difficult, but I don't think it's going to make things harder. I certainly don't believe.
Yeah. But like from a competition standpoint, you don't think that would be of concern?
I think that especially once descheduling happens, I think that there's going to be an incredible amount of competition, and so I think that it's I think the biggest are going to obviously have the best bet right off the bat, but I think it's hard to really predict, but I do think that it won't be necessarily harder for them,
That's a good point. I never really thought about it that way. That makes a lot of sense. When it gets rescheduled, their life will probably get easier. They'll probably have more, cash in the bank at the end of the day. Well, they most definitely would without, that punitive 280E tax code. But, from once it's descheduled, then it's wild. It's no longer that monopoly, right? It's just going to be a wild, fierce competition, especially in the US, right? The biggest economy in the world. And then, we'll jump into maybe the political. It's an election year. We're going into, I'm trying not to get into politics too much in this channel, and I'm from Canada, so I literally have no say and I can't vote. But with you being an American, you don't have to tell me who you're going to vote for or anything like that. I'm just wondering, like, what are your thoughts on both sides of the aisle? I even done videos on like RFK Jr. He's very pro crypto, very pro MJ. I've listened to that guy speak, and he just like pro common sense. Like, that guy just gets it. He's a very sharp individual, and if I could have it my way, I'd probably want him to be president. But if it comes like to the independent campaigns, the Democratic, the Republican, who do you think has the best chance of legalizing MJ? And like, we have the first Democratic pro MJ Democratic ticket now with Harris and Waltz. We have former President Trump coming out saying that he's starting to agree a lot more as states legalize. I mean, you basically have to, right? If 38 states are legal in some form, and over, almost half of the US are legal at the adult use level, like eventually you have to give the people what they want, right? And catch up with the time. So he's starting to change his tune, and JD Vance is kind of, there's some, he's kind of down to the states, right? So same thing with Trump, he's down to leaving it up to the states. And I think we need to do more of that, right? Getting away from the executive and letting Congress and the states figure it out. But what are your thoughts there? Who do you think has the best chance to legalize MJ?
Totally. So I think when it comes to Trump, I think that he's much less anti-cannabis than something he is. Obviously during his administration,
Agreed.
he took a hands-off approach, and he made those comments, as you said recently, that he's being more open to it. Honestly, I think those comments recently will segue into him announcing in the next month or so, and I don't have any source for this, it's just me personally, announcing in the next month or so that he either supports decriminalization, maybe rescheduling, descheduling, some kind of actual legit, policy he's going to support in regards to cannabis.
He mentioned Florida as well. He'd have an announcement on that.
And he didn't say straight up that he's against it, which is something.
If he was against it, you think he probably would have said just I'm against it.
Yeah,
He
exactly.
probably wouldn't have built like he wouldn't build up like like a weight and
Yeah,
and I'll take him out and say, oh, I don't support it. It's kind of silly,
exactly.
but
But on the other side, when you have Kamala Harris, what's important about her is that she actually co-sponsored the MORE Act when she was in the Senate. So she has for several years supported descheduling, which I think is a much better long-term goal, obviously, than rescheduling, and she does support legalization. So I think that her winning election and the Democrats taking back the House is probably the best path towards something like the MORE Act actually, taking effect. I think that if Trump wins, then it probably means that you also have a Republican-controlled House still. And even if Trump kind of switches and says he supports descheduling or something, as long as there's a Republican-controlled House, Speaker Mike Johnson is just very, very anti-cannabis in the sense that I don't think we're going to get any type of legislation through with him. So I think that Kamala winning between the two of them is probably going to be the best thing for the future of descheduling. I'm not super fearful, at least in the cannabis sector, of what like Trump would do, because he did take a hands-off approach. That's not going to change if he gets elected. I think he's going to, if anything, be more pro-cannabis. But when you have a candidate who's actually co-sponsored a descheduling bill, that's a pretty big deal, considering descheduling is really the end goal for a lot of people, who just say end the federal prohibition, let's get rid of it. So that's
stigma.
kind of,
yeah, for sure. I appreciate the insight, and we just got to get rid of. It's not. It's eventually you can vote them out, but eventually people retire and they they have decades of stigma, and like Mitch McConnell, he's got to go. Right? everybody. Maybe he doesn't have a leadership role. But I'm pretty sure anybody who's following MJ, who's a MJ advocate, they would want him to be out of there because he's been very anti. And look how quickly Trump did a 180 on crypto, right? He's he's like, I love a currency already. It's called the dollar, right? And then he created NFTs, and then he started selling like Bitcoin shoes. And it's like, oh, I can make money off this stuff. And then he loved it, right? But then he also likes the votes too. So if he did a 180 quickly on that, I'm right with you. Like, I don't think at the end of the day, it's just a face. It's just one person, and there's whole parties behind these. But yeah, I think I'm not too fearful either of either side of the aisle. But and then we'll wrap it up here. Just more of a personal question. Do you do any investing? Because like I'm in a investing and in trading community. So I'm just curious, do you do any MJ stock trading? Like, do you just buy and hold? Do you even own any stocks, if you don't mind me asking?
I do not own any stocks. I do own a little bit of crypto. I own a little bit of BTC and Ethereum. But I know I do not own any stocks at all. Definitely no cannabis stocks.
Okay, cool. Are you like thinking about it, or is it just not
so I have, I guess, concerns about me investing in the cannabis industry as a cannabis journalist. So I kind of just tried to just step back from that. Like, I have no issue with people invest, and I reported on cannabis stocks before and stuff. That's just personally something that I don't do, and it's not just cannabis stocks, as I mentioned. I kind of just don't invest in any stocks at the moment, and that may change in the future. But I do follow crypto, and kind of that crypto sort of at least for the last decade has been my form of investment. Instead of stocks, I've kind of just focused on that, and it's done me pretty decently so far. So
yeah, this is not financial advice. This is for entertainment purposes only. But yeah, that's basically very similar to me, right? I own more crypto than I do MJ dollar wise, just because I think crypto is closer to the end of its bull market, and I think we're going to see a pretty big alt season and rally there, and starting to see both. Even Chuck Schumer said that he wants to get crypto legislation done before the end of the year to kind of get back on the good side with all their crackdown and whatnot. But yeah, that's how I got into the MJ space. Was actually my friend told me about Bitcoin, and then I started investing in Bitcoin, and then bought it when it was like $3,000. And yeah, I was a technical analyst. I was in developing websites. I was a techie, and I just, it spoke to me. And I used to work for Invesco too, helping financial advisors. I wasn't one myself. I almost became one, but stressful enough manage my own money, let alone other people. So I just wanted to teach people how to manage their own money and educate them and, follow the sector. But I actually started making money on crypto, and then I started investing into cannabis stocks in 2018. And I think I bought Canopy Growth at like $2 Canadian,
Oh,
and went up to that huge run up to like what, 60 some dollars, I think it was in 2018, into the run up of legalization. But yeah, it was a fantastic time. It was fun. And, you know, I'm just super grateful that we're here, right? Like, it's only ever going to happen once. So totally get that you know, if it's a conflict of interest or the optics just aren't that great, being a marijuana journalist, that totally makes sense. But you know, you're definitely around the industry a lot, though. And this was a question that somebody asked me to bring up in our community. Like, if you had to pick a top three, like in terms of market cap, global powerhouse, and you don't have to answer it if you don't want to, but you know, who do you think has what it takes to make it long term, as say like a top three in the industry?
that's a good question. I know Canopy Growth would certainly be up there, and Tilray. You know, I'm not sure. I would really have to I could just kind of name a few off the top of my head, but to really give that answer the weight that it needs, like, I don't know if I could do that right now without kind of doing a little more research, only
Fair enough.
because just to be honest, and then I do look into the cannabis market, and I do report on it, but it's not my kind of foray, if that makes sense. So,
Oh,
um,
absolutely. Fair enough. No, I just someone asked me, and I was curious
that's a
too.
good
And
question.
yeah, absolutely. I find it interesting though that you mentioned two Canadian LPs before any multi-state
Yes,
operator.
yes, to say something, yeah.
Yeah, you might not. You might get some nasty comments from the MSO gang here, and not too.
Oh, yeah, it should have been up there. Yeah, that's true. That's
I'm
one
just
that's why I didn't want to give a list, because I knew I was going to leave a big one
kidding.
out.
Well, I'm right there with you. Like, I think Tilray, in my opinion, is going to be Tilray and Cureleaf, and the
Yeah,
third one I'm not sure. But yeah, if you look at Cureleaf, and that kind of goes back to my question earlier, that I mentioned, is the competition. And you know, you think of all these multi-state operators, like most of them only operate in a select few states, right? And then as they start to expand to the rest of the US, there's going to be huge capex requirements. There's going to be huge cash requirements. And a lot of these states, they're limited licensing. So you either have to buy a license from another company or like do a merger or an acquisition, you know, so it's going to be capital intensive. And then when you expand internationally, like look at Cureleaf, it
right.
operates in the US. I think they said they were number one market share in Florida, which I just about fell off my chair whenever he said that on the call. And then he also said on the call, the earnings call, Boris Jordan, that he believed that the beverage segment was going to be the second biggest next to flower. And I was like, whoa, I think it's underrated. I was like, that's a pretty big, bold statement. But if you look at Cureleaf, they just bought Northern Green Canada in Canada, so they're a Canadian operator now, and then they have their international footprint in Germany. And like, you know, they're not profitable yet, and their margins aren't great, but I think it's because of that international footprint and global reach that they have, right? And I
Right.
just I like that about Cureleaf, and I like that about Tilray. Like Tilray's same deal, right? They're in pretty much all of those same markets as well. And yeah, the two biggest market caps, Tilray being the biggest market cap in Canada, and then Cureleaf having the biggest market cap out of any company, and the most revenue too. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out for
Yes,
sure.
it is. That's for sure.
There'll be some opportunities with the private sector as well, right? And
Mhm.
you know, after rescheduling, you know, I heard an interview with Kevin O'Leary, and he said he was looking at this one MJ company. I think it was in Vermont or something,
Mhm.
and he's like, the the ROI on this thing is just, the opportunity's massive. And then he talked to his lawyer, and he's like, "Are you effing crazy?" He's like, "That's on Schedule One. Like that's the same as heroin." And he's like, "Oh," so he's like, "I can't." He's like, "I can't touch the stuff." So he's like, so you know, you got him on the sidelines. You got, you know,
Right.
just imagine when you get rescheduling and the stigma
Oh,
starts
it's
to
gonna
go
blow
away.
up.
Like a lot of these companies, right? It's optics and their shareholders and fiduciary duties. And, you know, if you're getting into a Schedule One drug, right? It's Coca-Cola getting into the MJ space at Schedule One, probably not going to fly with
Mm.
with their shareholders. So I think after rescheduling, like there's just going to be a wave of companies coming in, and, you know, CPG, and you know, it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out for sure.
Yeah, that's a great point. And yeah, I agree. And it's definitely going to blow up, and it will be very interesting to see how it works out.
For sure. All right. Well, anything you wanted to leave the audience with? I guess just any parting comments. Where can they find you? I guess, you know, I've already said it, the marijuanaherald.com. You want to plug your X Twitter handle in there, or is there best way? What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
So first off, thank you for having me on. It's been great to talk with you. I don't
Absolutely.
really have anything particular to plug other than the site itself, marijuanaherald.com. We do stories every single day. You can reach me at info@TheMarijuanaHerald.com if you have any questions or anything like that, if you have any news stories you want me to cover. But other than that, no, it's been great talking with you, though.
Absolutely. Likewise. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate your time, and it was a great chat. Hopefully we can do it again in the future.
Definitely. Sounds good. Thank you so much.
All right. My pleasure. Thanks a lot, Anthony.
Take care.